What is a clear sign that someone had a really rough childhood? Being able to immediately detect a shift in moods or imagining a shift in moods, worried about everyone else being in a good mood, and then mindlessly saying the first thing that comes to mind in an attempt to keep everyone calm and happy. At least that's what I do. I panic whenever I meet someone who is super stoic and monotone because I can't read them. Therefore, I can't engage in avoidance tactics to ensure they don't get upset. Never believing compliments and always assuming there's a catch when someone is nice to them. And just generally assuming people don't like you and are wishing you'd go away. I'm like that compliments are suspicious to me 8 away, unfortunately. Being bullied didn't help at all. It was rough growing up. Shows no emotion but is deeply sympathetic and sensitive. This one does hit hard. Too hard. Ireland. I work in suicide prevention year-round, and I don't show any emotion IRL unless it's massive circumstances relating to my childhood. Oh shit, yeah, this makes so much sense now. When I describe things to people, they look at me wide-eyed at times, like they had no idea. My mom did a great job, but she wasn't the only one at home. We were also fairly poor. I'll describe moments or conditions in my childhood sometimes, and find myself backtracking, pointing out good things, when people get quiet and just look at me with concern. I usually try to make things light and fun for people, but I know it's also a response to not show things are getting to me, or that I'm really struggling myself. I just look neutral or unaffected to my environment when things are scary or people are disturbed. But when someone is struggling, I'll make sure they're okay. I'll hear people freely talk about their struggles, but I'm so scared to talk about my own because I don't want to sound like I'm complaining or ungrateful or have some sort of ire turned towards me from a direction I'm not seeing. Does any of this make sense? They are bedroom kids, not living room kids, aka they tried to hide, avoid interactions when they were home by sneaking in, out of their rooms, and being as quiet as possible. If they were visible, they were targeted. This, my proudest achievement as a child, was learning to move around the house without a sound. Being seen was dangerous. Better for no one to know I was in the house. OMG, I feel this. I'm glad you put it into words for me, because this is 100% how I am. When my fiancé and I were starting dating, I'd stay at her parents' place with her. She'd leave for work and I'd hide in her room and literally starve and hold my bowels until she came home or I had to leave. She would ask me why, and I just couldn't be around her parents. They're nice people, great even. But I've been so conditioned to hide from parental figures that I hermit away in my room. Even when I got my own apartments as an adult, I lived out of my bedroom 90% of the time. Fuck, dude. They talk about memories of abuse like it's nothing. I don't know, it's off to others who have not been through it. I remember when I told my wife at the time about the time my brother and I were being noisy on a Saturday morning. My brother was around 6 or 7 and I was 8 or 9. So my dad came out of his room, duct taped our mouths shut, and made us stand in timeout staring at corners until he came and let us out. When he came back, 3 hours later, he yelled at us because we had sat down on the floor instead of remaining standing the whole time. I related this as a funny story from my childhood, when my dad tried a unique way of punishing us. She pointed out that it's abuse, and I was like, no, it wasn't. He didn't even hit us. That's when I learned that I had a very abusive childhood. I'm very casual about it because sometimes it needs to be said for whatever reason, but I don't want the person I'm telling to express pity. Gotta stop the awkward before it starts. Doing awesome in a crisis, but crumbling in peaceful times. There is always a crisis. When things are peaceful, that just means I don't know where or what the crisis is, and it's getting worse. This, right here. During stressful times, I'm the most cool-headed, undisturbed person almost in the world. But if nothing bad is happening and something small goes wrong, I half lose my shit. Being a people pleaser and always trying to keep the peace. Being hyper-independent, always thinking they did something wrong when someone is off with them. Trying to keep the peace is a big one for me. I really hate conflict, so I will do everything in my power to keep everything peaceful at a detriment to myself. Always thinking they did something wrong when someone is off with them. This generally stems from the abuse coming from the person's caregiver. Basically, from birth, a baby must attach itself to someone and be dependent on that person for survival. It is a biological inherent need. That connection with their caregiver must be protected at any and all costs. Their very survival depends on it. But when the person they attach to then turns around and abuses them, the attachment is so powerful that the child literally cannot comprehend that the caregiver is in the wrong. To them, their caregiver is like oxygen. If you have a coughing fit, you wouldn't think it's somehow oxygen's fault. You'd think there's something wrong with your lungs or throat perhaps. But your brain could never even entertain the possibility that oxygen itself is the problem. But when the abuse comes from the caregiver, the oxygen is what's causing the harm. The child needs that caregiver to survive and cannot even entertain any notion of risking losing their connection to that oxygen. So they blame themselves for the abuse. They reason that they must have done something to cause it, or that they're bad and deserve it, or that this happens to all kids, or that it wasn't as bad as it was, or that it's in the past and it won't happen again. Whatever lie they need to tell themselves, because asking a child to recognize that their caregiver abused them is like asking someone to stop breathing. It's not just difficult, it's virtually impossible. For me, if they get really defensive, they probably grew up being criticized for everything they did, or berated for being themselves. So they learned to rely on themselves to be an advocate, because nobody ever defended them. They feel a need to over-defend themselves from a childhood of being kicked down without anybody there to pick them up. I get defensive when I feel criticized, but now I'm dropping certain family members because I don't feel like arguing anymore with people who will not change. It used to feel like fighting the good fight, and now it feels like beating my head against the wall. Criticize away, y'all. Be concerned all you want. I'll just smile and nod and do what the fuck I want anyway. My sister-in-law is like this, and it's stressful sometimes because I feel like I have to be so careful with how I bring things up. But when she told me about how her dad treated her and her siblings, I had more empathy. Feeling awkward asking for help with a fear of troubling others. I know 'cause I am. For me, it's that I don't like feeling like I owe others. I can't help feeling everything comes with a string attached to it. And even if the other person is not out to take advantage of others at all, I'll still feel like I have to return the favor ASAP. Same. Always felt like crap when asking for help. Always did it a last resort. And even then, it took me much thought to get to the asking part. Feel like a burden all the time, especially when receiving gifts. My boyfriend's reaction would always be like, "Please don't spend your money on me." He's getting better though. I try my best to make him feel like he deserves good things. I'm reminded of this every Christmas actually, how deeply uncomfortable it is to get gifts, even from people who insisted on doing it and asked for a wish list in October. While I've grown more comfortable with people doing nice things for me, I have a difficult time not seeing it as leverage because that's how my folks used kindness. They eat everything off their plate even if they are full. They are minimalist because they grew up with hoarders. Even if they are in good financial standing, they penny pinch on needs. Or the opposite, horrible spending habits, an inability to save money because you didn't get anything as a kid and were not allowed any frivolous needs or even basic needs. So now that you have money, you just spend on whatever you want in the moment because you can. And it becomes almost a dopamine hit to buy things for yourself in the moment. I still save even minute bits of pasta that won't even make a lunch serving because the idea of throwing out food is abhorrent to me. Grew up fairly poor. They learned to cry silently because being overheard crying only made the abuse worse. I'll give you something to cry about. Once I cried silently about realizing I had taught myself to cry silently I cried while trying to remember at what age I had stopped crying audibly, and wondered if this was a permanent change, as in, if I wanted to cry audibly again at some point, would I even know how to do it anymore? That, and being mocked for crying. Still to this day, I view people crying openly as weak, and wonder why they don't realize they are giving the enemy exactly what they wanted. Gotta stay stone-faced so nobody knows they got to you. I wish that isn't where my mind went, but it is. Always apologizing. My cousin is in her 40s and still does it every other sentence. All of her siblings have cut off her parents. For me, it's disassociating when my wife needs me emotionally. I'm getting better at it, but disassociating is an automatic response to stress for me. Very emotionally unstable household growing up. The later part is so true, mostly because growing up I was gaslighted by showing emotions. So I do that too. The moment someone acts like that, I turn away because I feel like I'm about to be manipulated. I have a family member, in-law, who is constantly worried and apologizing for everything. Poor woman. I know she can't just relax and enjoy things, but I really do feel for her. I do wish she'd have some sort of counseling or something. They barely remember their childhood. This is a weird one for me. My mom beat the shit out of me, and I remember lots and lots of my childhood, but I only remember specific events. Random, hilarious, or sad, or scary, or sometimes just random moments where I was tripping out and staring at something. I don't remember the day-to-day. I couldn't tell you what my ritual was, who my schoolmates were, except ones associated with memories. And the memories are a blur in terms of how old I was. 2nd through 6th grade is a blur, but it's a blur because it's a bunch of the same few dozen memories all jumbled together, moving at super fast speed. Same with middle through high school. It wasn't until I left for college that there's a memory of the day-to-day. But it's not like my childhood is missing. I definitely remember the ass beatings. Definitely remember those. I definitely remember cuddling with my cat and hearing him purr. I remember my toys, making my sister laugh. I have memories, it's just that they're jumbled, and they fly by so fast. My memories only get coherent by the time I moved out. But is that a trauma response or just me getting old? I feel so personally attacked by this whole comments section. Just sat here with my memory blanks, hyper-independence, and funny childhood anecdotes that people are horrified by. They will never display vulnerability, so cannot form close emotional ties unless they can learn to trust enough to find a soft place to land. I know because I'm nearly 70 and still single, because I cling to the belief that the only person I can ever rely on is myself. That sounds so lonesome. My wife is never vulnerable around anyone but me, not even her psychologist. Well, not openly. He knows her well enough to read between the lines. I guess go me? If you basically have to pry innocuous information out of them during casual conversations. I learned at a very young age to answer only what was directly asked of me, and never volunteer information because it will be used against you later. I struggle with privacy a lot. I grew up always having to tell my parents where I was, who I was with, meet a strict curfew, etc. They'd call me constantly for updates, even when I was just at a friend's house I'd gone to 1,000,000 times. They would go through my belongings in my room all the time, including my phone and computer, even though I didn't have anything to hide and never did anything bad. They read my diary one time after tearing apart my whole room to find it, once they caught on that I had one. I tried to hide it under the mattress because my 10-year-old brain was dumb. I got grounded for a week for things and feelings I wrote in it, one of which was, I hated that they always searched my stuff. Sometimes they'd take my door off if they got suspicious, and I wasn't allowed to lock the bathroom, and often they'd enter when I was showering. Note, the house had more than one bathroom. I was basically never allowed any alone time. No idea why. Nothing happened to them in their childhood to spark that behavior. So now, I hate giving up my phone if someone needs to use it for something, or if I'm writing something, I don't want people to be able to read it unless I let them. I don't even have anything to hide. I just try to grasp onto any form of privacy I can. Sometimes I even sit alone in my car since my boyfriend works from home and we're in a small apartment. so I have nowhere else to go away from people. Not his fault. I'm still an open person about some things, but it's all about controlling what people get to know about me. I used to, and still sometimes do, just tell everyone everything hoping to be believed and trusted, but I often come off crazy and unhinged even. I journal now and have better coping mechanisms, but interaction, company, is what soothes me most and I get least. None of the social spheres I step in have an appropriate space for me. Only a small part of me is seen there at best, and for only a moment. They have food stashes to cope with the after effects of growing up with food insecurity. My mom grew up poor. Her mother was working 3 jobs post-war Germany, and there was literally no food for 4 children often. Now in Australia, her fridge and chest freezer is full of out-of-date food she got on special. I have tried to explain to her she is not saving money this way, but the trauma runs really deep. Also, forcing yourself to sleep so you don't feel hunger pangs. They laugh after telling you the most fucked up story you've ever heard. Telling a funny story and have everyone looking at me with mouths hanging open and eyes wide with horror was always very weird. It made me question my storytelling until my husband sat me down and explained what was really going on. Made me stop telling childhood stories for sure. I use this as a filter for who's cool to hang out with and who's not. I'm not wasting time befriending downers who get sad by my story of how my crackhead dad narrowly avoided dying on September 11th thanks to crack. Unhealthy? Of course. But I also think it's unhealthy to talk to people who want to convince you you're a victim, and you should be more sad or ashamed about it. A person is struggling with trust and emotional closeness. They may have difficulty forming healthy relationships, or might seem distant or defensive. They could also have intense reactions to situations that trigger past trauma. Often, they might avoid talking about their past or seem uncomfortable with vulnerability. Low self-esteem, not talking about their home life or family in much detail, and not taking their own mental health seriously, or bottling things up and being unable to ask for help because they've been constantly belittled or hurt worse when they tried to open up about issues. This is me, IRL as fuck for me. My past is so fucked up. Nobody I know now doesn't even know exactly where I am from, because I can't go any details, even can't tell where I am from. I am ashamed because of all that. They go through their life not attracting any attention, not overly sharing with others when they can control it, living a controlled lifestyle that is not affected by others whenever possible. They don't trust anyone, or maybe only a few, who have proven their loyalty. If you don't stand out, you don't get noticed, you don't get opinions, and you don't get judged, and you don't get hurt. I think of it as sort of like being a stagehand. Technically, I exist, but it's preferable if we all keep up the illusion that I don't. It is sad that we feel this way, but when we are invisible, we feel safer. Meldon, my friend. Hiding from the world in their house, BC people in their life made them feel ugly and not good enough for the world to see. Hypersexuality, calm in the storm, doesn't cry in front of anyone, always saying sorry, flinching when you raise hands or anything around them. The list goes on. Emotions are well guarded, rarely shares anything positive or personal. Not always the case. People have different levels of openness. I've been asked repeatedly in a former employer's lunchroom what my retirement savings and mortgagee payments are by acquaintance-level colleagues. Out of line to me. Others seem to think that was okay. They have no opinion on anything. None. You ask them about what they think on something, and they shut down because they were trained not to be disrespectful or upset the family by basically punishing them for expressing their opinion on something that the toxic family sees as an attack and disrespect towards them. So now they simply never formulate an opinion on anything. They're just neutral on every topic. I was this way, but now in my 30s, as I've begun to heal, my opinions are robust AF and very much rebellious. I became everything they said I was, and good and glad I did. My life has never been better. That is true for someone they don't trust or know well. If you do get into their inner circle, you will be surprised by the person hiding there. It takes patience, time, and dedication, but it is worth it. And seeing someone bloom in your presence is magical. Night terrors / CPTSD. On a related note, they did an MRI scan on both children who have suffered trauma and veterans. They found that the hippocampal volume is affected. The area is responsible for learning and memory, survival, feeding, fighting, and sexual behavior. The good news is that it is reversible. I still have recurring nightmares about my childhood, and I am almost 40. I have not found a 100% fix for it, though sleeping with a light helps, and leaving the TV on helps. I had night terrors and nightmares all through my childhood. I have always operated on lack of sleep. It's like my brain refuses to let the memories go. Living out of a bag in case you need to get out fast. Withdrawing into things like TV, computers, hobbies for hours to escape, disassociate from the world.